Scattered through hidden corners of history and beneath familiar terrain lie objects that challenge the very story of humanity. Ancient tools embedded in impossible layers, manuscripts written in unknown languages, and artifacts of intricate design appear where they should not. As you watch, the video guides you across remote deserts, forgotten ruins, and subterranean depths, uncovering the contexts in which these relics were found and the mysteries they carry. Each discovery draws you into a world where the boundaries of time and human achievement blur, revealing evidence of lost knowledge, craftsmanship beyond expectation, and questions that refuse simple answers. Every artifact tells a story that lingers long after the earth itself has revealed its secret. The London hammer. When the rock split open in the summer heat of 1936, something impossible appeared inside. Embedded within a lump of ancient stone near London, Texas, was a wooden-handled hammer, its metal head sealed in the matrix as if time itself had entombed it. The discovery was accidental, a curious object found during a family hike, yet it would soon become one of the most bewildering artifacts ever pulled from the earth. The hammer was not a rusted remnant of modern industry. Its iron head, still smooth and untarnished, lay enclosed in rock that some geologists claimed dated back hundreds of millions of years. The hammer's preservation seemed to defy natural law. The handle, half turned to coal, hinted at extreme age, while the head's iron composition 96% pure, with traces of chlorine and sulfur, baffled metallurgists. Such purity required techniques unknown before the industrial era, and the alloy's resistance to rust suggested a process lost to time. If the surrounding rock truly belonged to the Cretaceous period, the artifact's presence there implied a civilization wielding metal tools when dinosaurs still walked the earth. Scientists argued that such a claim was absurd, yet the evidence lay in stone, heavy and tangible. The area around London, Texas, is rich in sandstone and limestone from an ancient seabed. Fossilized shells and marine imprints mark its layers, silent witnesses to vanished oceans. It was within one of these deposits, reportedly from the lower Cretaceous, that the hammer rested. Those who examined it noted that the rock had formed around the object, not merely hardened over it by sediment. This, they argued, meant the hammer had been encased for an immense span of time, far beyond the reach of recorded history. Yet others proposed that mineralization could occur more rapidly under rare conditions, that perhaps the hammer had fallen into a crevice and been engulfed by a chemical concretion. Between those two explanations lies a gap wide enough for mystery to thrive. In the years that followed, the London hammer, as it came to be known, circulated among researchers, skeptics, and creationists alike. To some, it was proof that human technology predated accepted timelines. To others, it was simply a curiosity, misinterpreted by those eager to rewrite history. Yet even the most cautious observers could not ignore the peculiar details. The hammer's head bore no tool marks from modern casting. Its surface lacked corrosion despite exposure to moisture, suggesting a metallurgical composition unknown to 19th century blacksmiths. Tests revealed no traces of carbon, an absence that made the iron unusually hard. From obscurity to enigma, the hammer's journey mirrors humanity's uneasy relationship with the past. Each analysis, whether chemical, geological, or contextual, seems to deepen the uncertainty rather than resolve it. The object refuses to yield to easy classification. It sits uneasily in museum collections and private hands, too modern for its supposed age, yet too ancient for its form. Even the process of dating the surrounding rock remains contentious. Some scientists point out that mineralization can mimic geological age, while others maintain that such uniform encasement cannot form around recent artifacts without immense pressure and time. Over the decades, its story has been retold, reshaped by each new attempt to reconcile science with anomaly. The hammer has appeared in textbooks, television documentaries, and fringe journals, its image a symbol of dissonance between what is known and what might be true. Critics argue that the rock was not as old as claimed, that the concretion formed in recent centuries through chemical precipitation. Supporters counter that such rapid mineralization cannot account for the coalified wood or the iron's pristine surface. Both camps agree on one thing: the artifact resists definitive explanation. When examined closely, the hammer seems less an industrial relic than a quiet message from deep time. Its wooden grip, darkened and fragile, bears the grain of something once alive. The head, heavy and flawless, reflects faintly under light, as if untouched by oxidation or decay. In this contrast of organic and eternal, of tool and stone, lies its most haunting quality. It evokes not the certainty of discovery, but the unease of intrusion, the feeling that something from an impossible age has crossed into ours, carrying with it the echo of forgotten hands. What unsettles most is not the hammer itself, but the silence of the centuries. It implies a silence broken only by the thought that someone, long before history began, may have already learned to forge the impossible. The Antikythera mechanism. From the floor of the Aegean Sea came a discovery that should not have existed. When sponge divers descended near the island of Antikythera in 1900, they found the remnants of a shipwreck buried beneath coral and centuries of sediment. Among the statues and shattered amphorae lay a cluster of corroded bronze fragments, fused and heavy with mystery. It would take decades before anyone realized that within those encrusted remains lay the most sophisticated device the ancient world had ever produced. The wreck that held it lay scattered off Antikythera's coast, a silent grave of bronze and marble. The ship, likely bound from Asia Minor to Rome, carried treasures meant for the elite sculptures, glassware, fine goods. Storms had driven it to the depths sometime around the 1st century BCE, preserving its cargo beneath layers of silt. But X-ray imaging revealed otherwise. This was no ornament, but an intricate mechanism built for calculation. Among the relics, divers had noticed a corroded lump of bronze, intertwined with gears. When the object was cleaned, tiny teeth appeared, fragments of interlocking wheels once sealed within wooden panels. Archaeologists counted more than 30 of them, each carved with precision impossible to attribute to accident. It was a clockwork relic from an age not known for machines. When the artifact reached the surface, its fragments revealed precision that defied the centuries. The gears meshed with ratios corresponding to celestial cycles, and faint Greek inscriptions hinted at astronomical alignments. Scholars examining the pieces found markings that predicted eclipses, charted the movement of planets, and accounted for the irregular orbit of the moon. The mechanism was a clockwork universe rendered in bronze, an ancient computer centuries before such a thing was conceivable. Scientists studying its remains uncovered a hidden complexity, 37 gears, fine inscriptions, and an astronomical purpose. The design reflected an understanding of geometry and mechanics that would not reappear until the Renaissance. The device could display lunar phases, planetary positions, and even the timing of ancient athletic games. It was both calendar and cosmos, built with precision so advanced that its makers seemed to belong to another world of knowledge. Its purpose was not decoration, but calculation, a mechanical model of the heavens, crafted in the 2nd century BCE. That date, confirmed by inscriptions referencing Olympiads, placed the mechanism more than 1,000 years ahead of comparable technology. Bronze gearing of such intricacy would not reappear until medieval Europe. Yet the Antikythera mechanism had already achieved what later engineers would struggle to perfect, a synchronized representation of celestial motion carved from metal and insight. What unsettled researchers was not only its craftsmanship, but its isolation in time. There were no other known examples, no descriptions in surviving texts, and no lineage of builders. It appeared fully formed, then vanished without a successor. The knowledge it embodied, a synthesis of science, mathematics, and artistry, had no recorded origin. Historians were left with an object that fit nowhere in the sequence of invention, a solitary witness to a brilliance that history failed to remember. The mechanism's gearwork mirrored devices not seen again until the Renaissance, 1200 years later. Some theorized it came from the school of Archimedes, whose rumored inventions once blurred the boundary between imagination and science. Others proposed that it was made in Rhodes, where astronomers studied planetary motion through mechanical models. But no workshop or craftsman could be traced. The mechanism seemed to arise from a vanished tradition, one that left no apprentices, no manuals, no echo. Attempts to replicate its design revealed precision comparable to modern clockmaking. Each gear tooth was cut with accuracy measurable to fractions of a millimeter. Reconstructed with 3D scans, it proved capable of replicating planetary motion with stunning accuracy. Whoever made it possessed not only knowledge, but mastery. Even its inscriptions, Greek names of zodiac signs and eclipses, spoke of a science that history had forgotten. The lettering referenced Babylonian astronomical cycles and Egyptian calendars, suggesting an exchange of knowledge across civilizations. On one dial, Venus's orbit aligned with the goddess Aphrodite. Another tracked lunar irregularities with remarkable precision. Every mark hinted at a worldview, in which myth and mathematics were not opposites, but reflections of the same truth. The Antikythera mechanism endures as a fragment of impossible knowledge and ancient intelligence that slipped beneath the waves and into myth. The Baghdad Battery, amid the quiet shelves of the Iraq Museum, a small clay vessel sat among countless shards and tablets, unremarkable to anyone passing by. The air in the storerooms carried the faint scent of dust and oil, and light fell unevenly across the labelled fragments of Mesopotamia's long-forgotten dynasties. Yet within that calm accumulation of relics, this jar would come to disturb more certainties than any gilded statue or engraved tablet ever could. When first examined, it revealed no ornamentation, no inscription, no sign of reverence or use, just a plain form sealed with pitch and lined with metal, as though its purpose was meant to remain unseen. The object itself offered no hint of its age or intent. Standing roughly 15 centimeters high, the vessel's clay walls enclosed a copper cylinder rolled tight and capped with a layer of asphalt. Through its center ran an iron rod, corroded and brittle from centuries of exposure. The simplicity was deceptive. Every component seemed deliberate. Those who studied it could not decide whether it was a mere container or a mechanism awaiting rediscovery. To touch it was to feel a weight out of proportion to its size, as if it had carried something far more intangible than liquid or grain, perhaps a secret of energy long misunderstood. When Wilhelm Koenig examined the piece in 1938, he sensed that its design implied more than chance. Then, an assistant director at the Iraq Museum, Koenig compared the vessel's structure to early experiments in electricity, noting its resemblance to a galvanic cell. His conclusion that the jar might have produced a weak electric current when filled with an acidic solution was met with skepticism and fascination in equal measure. Some dismissed his theory as imaginative folly. Others saw in it the ghost of a technology lost to time. The notion that electricity could have been known, even in a primitive form, to the craftsmen of Parthian Mesopotamia strained every accepted timeline of science. Yet even within the known chronology of Mesopotamia, there were no clear companions to this object. The Parthian and later Sasanian artisans mastered metalwork, glassmaking, and fine inlay, yet no inscriptions, murals, or artifacts spoke of electrical use or awareness. The Baghdad Battery stood alone in that silence, unlinked to any device or description that could explain its function. Its isolation made it more haunting, a relic that appeared designed for a process no one else had recorded. Some argued it might have been used for electroplating jewellery, though no evidence of such a technique has ever been found from the same period. The more scholars searched for context, the less the jar seemed to belong anywhere. In laboratories decades later, experimenters filled replicas with vinegar or grape juice, joining copper and iron as Koenig had suggested. Each test produced a faint current, enough to plate a small piece of metal or make a needle quiver. Yet even these results deepened rather than resolved the enigma. If it could function as a battery, why was it made in isolation, and what purpose could such fragile energy have served in a world without wires or lamps? Others proposed that its materials might have been assembled coincidentally, their alignment accidental rather than intentional. But coincidence rarely feels so symmetrical. Every recreation of the vessel, every controlled spark, seemed to echo an ancient precision that refused to explain itself. What remains most unsettling is not whether the jar could generate electricity, but why it was made at all. Archaeology is built upon patterns, series, replications, evolutions of form, but the Baghdad Battery resists such lineage. It exists without predecessors or successors, an orphan of invention. Theories have multiplied: ritual container, medical instrument, electroplating tool, or votive object sealed for the afterlife. None satisfies completely. Each suggestion circles back to the same unease, the sense that its maker understood something that history forgot, or perhaps that the understanding was never meant for us to share. Somewhere in the dim storage rooms of Baghdad, where light flickers across cabinets of labelled clay and oxidized bronze, the vessel's surviving fragments are said to rest once more. Their surfaces bear the quiet erosion of centuries, yet the form still conveys precision, intention, and a faint whisper of energy. Every attempt to define it only widens the space between what is known and what is imagined, leaving the object poised forever on the edge of comprehension. And though the jar now rests in silence, it still seems to hold a charge of unanswered intent. The Dropa stones. The first obstacle in tracing the Dropa stones is that almost nothing official remains. Mentions appear in scattered translations, in secondary accounts, in books quoting one another with slight variations. Photographs once circulated through obscure journals, but cannot be verified today. Even the names of the researchers involved shift from one retelling to another, as if the story itself were determined to erase its witnesses. What survives are fragments, dates, locations, measurements assembled from decades of repetition and contradiction, forming a pattern of uncertainty that resists both confirmation and dismissal. What little can be reconstructed comes from scattered references to an expedition in 1938 led by Chinese archaeologists in the Bayanhar Mountains, near the border of Tibet. The team reportedly entered a series of caves lined with neat rows of tombs, each containing the remains of small, fragile bodies with unusually large skulls. Between them lay hundreds of thin stone discs, each carved with a hole at its center and spiral grooves etched outward toward the rim. The caves were remote and wind-scoured, their walls marked by strange pictographs showing the sun, stars, and dots descending from above. To those who recorded the find, the stones seemed not like artifacts of a single burial, but part of a larger and deliberate archive, an attempt to preserve something far older than the graves themselves. Descriptions of the discs themselves vary slightly between reports, yet the consistency of certain details is striking. Each measured roughly 20 centimeters in diameter, crafted from a type of granite laced with metallic impurities. When examined under magnification, faint characters were said to appear within the grooves, so fine they seemed almost incised by machinery rather than hand tools. A microscopic study was reported to reveal wear consistent with immense age, though no exact dating was ever published. The notion of primitive carving was hard to reconcile with their precision, and the spiral inscriptions seemed to follow a mathematical pattern that hinted at language rather than decoration. The supposed deciphering of the inscriptions added a layer of unease. Accounts attribute the work to Dr. Chipu Teng of Beijing University, who allegedly translated portions of the discs after years of study. His reported findings spoke of a people called the Dropa, whose craft had fallen from the sky after a failed landing, leaving them stranded among the mountains. The inscriptions described conflict with the local tribes, the struggle to survive, and the eventual disappearance of the Dropa from the earth. No published papers survived to support this account, and the university's archives contain no trace of such research. Soviet scientists, said to have later analyzed some of the discs, reportedly detected electrical charges when running current through their metallic veins, though these results were never independently verified. Every layer of inquiry seems to dissolve upon inspection, leaving only the outline of a story that refuses to vanish. By the 1960 seconds, the story had taken on a life of its own. It appeared in European and Russian journals, retold with minor embellishments, and often without original citation. Writers like Hartwig Hausdorff and Ernst Wegerer reintroduced the stones to Western audiences decades later, tying them to broader theories of ancient contact and lost civilization. The Dropa, they claimed, embodied a forgotten intersection between myth and prehistory, a record of an encounter too far back to document, too strange to accept. Yet for every retelling, the same absence remained. No verifiable artifacts, no preserved stones, no museum catalogue entries or photographic negatives. Each reference seemed to point to a source that no longer existed, and yet, despite the missing evidence, the story persists. It has survived in documentaries, essays, and late-night broadcasts, its details reshaped to fit new technologies and modern anxieties. The Dropa stones have become less a relic than a mirror, reflecting the limits of what archaeology can prove and what imagination refuses to release. Even in skepticism, the fascination endures a reminder that absence can be as compelling as presence, and that erasure itself can leave an indelible mark. Somewhere in the corridors of forgotten archives, perhaps mislabeled or mislaid, the stones might still wait, their spirals locked with meanings we have yet to learn how to read. If they do exist, they may already be telling a story that no one alive can still understand. The Wolfsegg Iron Cube. The mine at Wolfsegg was an ordinary site of labour until the pick struck stone that should not have been there. In 1885, workers digging through lignite coal in the Austrian region of Hausruckwald uncovered something sharp-edged within the black seam. It was small enough to fit in a hand, but its geometry caught the light in a way no natural rock ever did. The miner who pulled it free brushed away the coal dust to find a cube of metal, dull grey and heavy, its corners slightly rounded, but its faces straight and precise. In a layer of earth said to be millions of years old, the cube seemed both out of place and out of time. When the miners pried the object from the coal seam, they found it was no stone at all. Its surface bore faint striations, not from a modern tool, but from age and compression. The surrounding coal suggested it had been entombed there long before human industry reached the region. Word of the find spread quickly through Wolfsegg, where the local mining engineer passed the object to his supervisor, and from there it reached the attention of Dr. Adolf Gerlt, a professor at the University of Bonn. In his report, Gerlt described the cube as an iron-like mass, weighing nearly 800 grams, composed of a metallic substance with traces of nickel and carbon, but no clear signs of artificial casting. The discovery's setting embedded in a tertiary coal deposit implied a provenance that defied any conventional timeline of metallurgy. In Vienna, analysis began with caution. The object was sent to the Natural History Museum, where specialists examined it under controlled light and chemical testing. The cube was magnetized, its structure dense and uniform, without inclusions or bubbles, typical of smelted metal. Its composition suggested refined iron, yet there were no indications of modern smelting or tool marks from machinery. The 4 flattened sides, 2 slightly convex faces, and even chamfered edges appeared deliberate, as if shaped for a purpose. To some, it resembled a bearing or a mechanical component. To others, a ritual object whose origin had long been erased by time. Each explanation seemed to require a history that did not exist. Explanations soon multiplied. One camp argued that the cube was a natural concretion, an iron pyrite nodule formed under geological pressure, its shape a quirk of crystal symmetry. Others countered that its density, magnetic qualities, and surface texture contradicted that claim. A few suggested contamination from nearby mining operations, perhaps a fragment of machinery from a previous excavation that became trapped in a more recent layer. Yet the coal seam's documented age, estimated between 60 and 65 million years, made such theories increasingly difficult to defend. Each possibility demanded an exception to what was known about geology, metallurgy, or time itself. For a time, the cube rested in a small museum display, labelled simply as the Wolfsegg iron. It sat among regional fossils and mineral samples in the Heimathas Museum of Bruck. Visitors described it as smaller than expected, no larger than a fist, but possessing a strange precision that seemed to invite doubt. In the mid-20th century, it disappeared from public record. Some said misplaced during relocation. Others claimed it was removed for further analysis that never occurred. Decades later, it resurfaced within the museum's storage collection, still marked by its old catalogue number, though its original coal matrix had long since vanished. Without the context of its discovery, it became a riddle stripped of evidence, preserved only as an object of contradiction. Even now, the Wolfsegg iron cube remains a contradiction embodied in metal. It exists at the intersection of 2 disciplines that cannot reconcile their conclusions: geology, which insists that the seam predates humanity, and archaeology, which recognizes deliberate manufacture. Theories have stretched across centuries and continents, from ancient civilizations to meteorite fragments, from unknown machines to artifacts displaced by cataclysm, but none hold under scrutiny. Its surface bears no inscription, no trace of intent beyond its own geometry, yet its precision feels purposeful. Those who have seen it up close describe the sensation of looking at something that remembers a world older than history, forged by hands or forces unrecorded. Should the coal have entombed it for millions of years, perhaps its discovery was never intended. The Koso artifact, encased within a shell of stone, the object appeared both primitive and deliberate, as though nature and design had conspired to create something neither wholly geological nor entirely mechanical. Its surface bore the rough, granular texture of a geode, yet a precise metallic form glinted from within. Those who first saw it described the object as unnerving an intrusion of industry into the language of minerals. The concretion that surrounded it was dense and seemingly ancient, a hardened mass that should have sealed away any trace of modern craftsmanship. And yet, in its center rested something unmistakably artificial. The story of its discovery began on a winter afternoon in 1961 near the desert town of Olancha, California. 3 friends, Wallace Lane, Virginia Maxey, and Mike Mikesell, were searching the Koso Mountains for geodes to sell in their shop. When Mikesell attempted to cut one open, his diamond saw snapped. Inside the fractured nodule lay a cylindrical structure, metallic and intricate, unlike anything expected from a rock. Embedded within layers of clay and fossilized shells, the find seemed impossibly out of place. Some later claimed the concretion could be 500,000 years old, a timeline that made the metallic object within an absurd impossibility. Under laboratory light, the enigma deepened. X-rays revealed a symmetrical core resembling a spark plug encased in a hardened matrix. The interior showed a metallic shaft, a ceramic insulator, and what looked like a threaded end, all features aligned with 20th century engineering. Yet the surrounding material was not a simple crust of mud or mineral deposit. Geologists described it as a genuine concretion one that typically forms over thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of years. The paradox was immediate. If the outer rock truly predated humanity's technological era, then the object it entombed defied every accepted chronology of invention. Beneath the microscope, the concretion revealed a curious mix of materials: hardened clay, quartz fragments, and fossilized diatoms known to date back to the Pleistocene epoch. Analysts noted that the outer layer bore distinct signs of submersion, suggesting that the object had once rested in a body of mineral-rich water before hardening over time. Comparisons were drawn to natural concretions found along ancient lake beds in the Owens Valley, though none of those had ever trapped anything so precisely engineered. This geological profile, if accurate, implied a time depth far beyond the lifespan of any machine known to modern science. As reports circulated among specialists, the artifact became a battlefield of interpretation. Some geologists dismissed it outright as a modern spark plug encased through natural mineralization, an artifact of mechanical discard mistaken for a relic. Others argued that the concretion's composition, containing fossilized diatoms and ancient sediment, could not have formed in such a short span. Publications such as INFO Journal and Fate magazine amplified the dispute, proposing that the Kosso artifact might belong to a lost civilization or even represent evidence of anachronistic technology. Photographs of the X-rays appeared in newsletters and lectures, inviting a wave of speculation that merged science with myth. In the years that followed, the artifact itself disappeared. The last confirmed sighting was at the home of Wallace Lane, whose private collection went unseen after his death. Researchers who sought to test the object again found only second-hand records, grainy photographs, scattered notes, and recollections that contradicted one another. One surviving image showed clear spark plug features, another seemed less defined, suggesting distortion or misinterpretation. Without the original specimen, no definitive analysis could proceed. The missing artifact became as significant as the artifact itself, its absence magnifying the mystery that surrounded it. What endures in the record is not certainty, but fascination. The Kosso artifact continues to exist in the margins of scientific debate, an example of how incomplete evidence can challenge even the most rational minds. Whether it was an industrial relic caught in a natural concretion or an impossibly ancient mechanism, it stands as a reminder that context shapes belief as much as proof. Even among those who dismiss its more extravagant claims, there remains an unease, a recognition that the artifact's brief emergence revealed how fragile the boundaries of explanation can be. It waits, perhaps still buried in desert stone, for another blade to find what the first one could not. The Saqqara bird, long before wings of metal pierced the sky, the dream of flight had already taken form in myth. Ancient Egypt's walls and papyri were filled with visions of ascent souls rising toward the heavens. Gods carried on solar boats across endless air. Among the relics left to guard those journeys lies an object whose simplicity conceals disquieting precision. A small wooden bird carved more than 2,000 years ago, shaped less like a creature of nature than a vessel that might once have known motion through the air. Buried in the necropolis of Saqqara, among relics of devotion and eternity, one carving refused to conform. When archaeologists uncovered it in 1898 from the tomb of Padi Yemen, a priest of Amun, they at first took it for a toy or symbolic ornament. Only later did its proportions begin to disturb that assumption. The figure's wings are straight and angled, its fuselage narrow, its tail vertical rather than horizontal. It has no legs, no clear avian features of movement or stance. In a civilization so deliberate in its art, where every shape bore meaning, such deviations were never accidental. Its surface bears the marks of deliberate design: wings swept back, body streamlined, tail vertical. Crafted from sycamore, the model measures about 7 inches across, its balance so fine that a gentle breath can set it gliding for a moment before it falls. The lack of decorative detail is striking. No feathers, no eyes, only form. Aerodynamic studies later confirmed that its contours mirrored those of modern aircraft more than any living bird. The more one measures its curves, the more deliberate they appear, as though their maker had studied motion through air rather than motion through life. The context of its discovery adds further intrigue. The Saqqara complex, stretching across the desert plateau near Memphis, was a labyrinth of tombs dedicated to Egypt's earliest dynasties. Thousands of artifacts recovered there depicted daily lifeboats, animals, servants, but none matched the bird's anomalous contours. Nearby wooden carvings displayed vivid plumage and outstretched talons, yet this single object was austere, stripped of realism. Even among the precision of funerary art, it stood apart, as if its maker had envisioned not the imitation of life, but the abstraction of flight itself. When aeronautical experts examined it generations later, curiosity shifted from symbolism to function. In the 1970 seconds, Dr. Khalil Masiha, an Egyptian physician and amateur archaeologist, became captivated by the object's resemblance to a glider. He constructed scale models, testing them for lift and stability. Without a tail rudder, they tended to roll, but when a vertical stabilizer was added, a modification consistent with aircraft design, the replicas achieved controlled flight. Masiha's findings, though never peer-reviewed, raised unsettling implications that someone in ancient Egypt had, at the very least, understood aerodynamic principles centuries before the first recorded experiments with flight. Within scholarly circles, the Saqqara bird remains a quiet heresy, too advanced to ignore, too uncertain to claim. Egyptologists tend to classify it as a votive offering to Horus, god of the sky, or a child's toy symbolizing rebirth and freedom. Yet its streamlined form resists easy reduction to metaphor. No other known artifact from that era shares its exact geometry. Some researchers proposed that it was a model for a ceremonial standard. Others speculated it could have been part of a weather vane, or even an acoustic device. Each theory resolves one question while opening several more, reminding us that the object's creator, whether artisan or visionary, worked from knowledge whose scope remains unclear. Perhaps what endures is not proof of flight, but the memory of those who imagined it first. Ancient Egyptians believed that to name a thing was to grant it life, and to carve its form was to prepare it for eternity. The Saqqara bird, in that sense, may have been a prayer given shape, a silent wish for ascension embodied in wood. Yet the perfection of its balance, the exactitude of its proportions, and the haunting familiarity of its design continue to disturb the line between spiritual art and forgotten science. In its silence, it embodies the one mystery shared by both faith and invention, the longing to rise beyond what the earth allows. A fragment of carved wood may yet hold the earliest whisper of humankind's desire to defy the sky. The Dorchester pot, deep within the hardened folds of the earth, layers of ancient sediment conceal traces of worlds long vanished. These stone beds, formed over millions of years, record eras when life itself was still learning to shape bone and scale. Within one such stratum, in Dorchester, Massachusetts, an explosion in 1851 fractured a slab of compacted rock that should have remained untouched since prehistoric times. What emerged from its depths was not fossilized plant matter or mineralized shell, but an artifact so refined in form and workmanship that its very existence seemed to mock the slow pace of geological time. From one such deposit, shattered open by an ordinary blast, emerged something entirely alien to its surroundings. The blast, set off by local workers quarrying for building stone, tore apart the hard pudding stone and exposed a metallic fragment embedded within. When examined, it was found to be the upper half of a small bell-shaped vessel, its surface adorned with floral patterns and geometric bands as though made for ceremony or display. The other half of the vessel, found close by, completed a form just under 5 inches tall, an object that bore no resemblance to the tools, containers, or relics of any known prehistoric culture. Forged from a dark metallic substance and engraved with intricate motifs, the artifact displayed craftsmanship impossible to reconcile with its geological prism. The material was analysed by local observers of the time and described as a zinc-silver alloy, with a purity and polish that suggested intentional smelting. Such alloys require temperatures and techniques that would not emerge until long after the stone layer was formed. Even more curious was its decorative detail. 6 small floral emblems encircled its base, each precisely symmetrical, hinting at design rather than accident. The vessel, now dubbed the Dorchester pot, had no place in the Devonian rock from which it was torn, a rock estimated to be over 600 million years old. Attempts to determine its origin only deepened the confusion, for laboratory tests suggested an age beyond human reach. The pudding stone in which it was found was a sedimentary matrix composed of pebbles and quartz, cemented together, its formation belonging to a time when no mammals, let alone metalworkers, could have existed. If the pot had been placed there later, it would have required fissures or disturbances in the rock, yet none were recorded. The surfaces of the break showed no sign of intrusion, as though the object had been sealed within since the rock's creation. Records preserved in Boston's 19th century archives reveal how the object stirred both fascination and disbelief. The Scientific American published a brief notice in 1852 describing the pot and the circumstances of its discovery. While the editors expressed skepticism, they admitted the details were puzzling. Local newspapers echoed the same uncertainty, reporting the find as a geological curiosity without explaining. The artifact was briefly exhibited in the offices of a local naturalist before vanishing from view, its trail lost in the shifting ownership of private collections. In later years, mentions of the pot faded from official catalogues, leaving its final location uncertain. Some researchers have speculated that it may have been misplaced among other 19th century curiosities. Others suspect it was quietly discarded after skepticism overtook wonder. Yet the original account, supported by drawings and first-hand testimony, remains part of the record. The notion of an advanced object, entombed in ancient stone, has never entirely been dispelled, for no conclusive evidence has surfaced to prove fabrication. Another layer of intrigue lies in the timing of its discovery. The mid-19th century marked an age of expanding industrial progress, when geology was rewriting human understanding of time. To encounter a man-made object sealed in stone was to confront the possibility that civilization itself might predate accepted history. The Dorchester pot became a symbol not just of anomaly, but of the fragile boundaries that define human chronology, boundaries that might be more porous than scholars once believed. The mystery also endures because its context resists ordinary explanation. While some propose the pot may have been lodged in a natural cavity later filled by mineral deposits, no record of such alteration exists. Others argue that early reports exaggerated the find, yet none have produced evidence to refute the detailed 1,852 illustrations. As it stands, the Dorchester pot remains an unresolved question, pressed into the stone record, a remnant of something that should not be there, but is. Time may have sealed it away again, but the question it raised has never been buried. The Klerksdorp spheres. In the red earth of South Africa's western Transvaal, time is measured not by centuries, but by layers of stone that remember the planet's earliest days. Within these rocks lies pyrophyllite, a soft, fine-grained mineral that once formed from volcanic ash nearly 3 billion years ago. As miners in the Ottosdal region cut deeper into the deposits, they unearthed more than gold or ore. They uncovered shapes that did not belong in the language of geology. Perfect spheres, small enough to fit in the palm, rested encased within the solid matrix of stone, older than multicellular life itself. From these deposits, miners began unearthing small, metallic spheres that seemed shaped with deliberate purpose. Some were discovered intact, others split cleanly through by machinery, revealing internal structure rather than hollow space. Their surfaces gleamed faintly, dark brown to bluish in tone, and several were etched with shallow, even grooves running precisely around their equators. At first, workers assumed them to be industrial residue from past drilling, until identical spheres appeared at depths untouched by modern tools. Each one measured only a few centimeters across, yet their symmetry was astonishing, some marked with shallow parallel grooves that ran perfectly around their equators. In their uniformity lay a quiet contradiction. Natural stone formations seldom mimic precision so exact. The spheres appeared balanced, their centers of gravity nearly perfect, and in several cases they rotated smoothly on flat surfaces when nudged. To the miners, they were curiosities. To geologists who examined them, they were impossibilities embedded in an unbroken seam of ancient rock. Laboratory examinations revealed compositions of hematite and wollastonite, minerals formed under immense heat and pressure billions of years ago. Hematite, an iron oxide, can indeed crystallize naturally but never, in the form of near-perfect spheres with engraved lines. Analyses conducted at the University of Johannesburg and other laboratories confirmed the pyrophyllite surrounding the spheres was Precambrian, dated between 2.8 and 3 billion years old. The contrast between the rock's age and the manufactured appearance of the spheres became the heart of their enigma. They seemed both geological and engineered. Scientists at the time struggled to classify them, torn between geological explanation and mechanical implication. Some argued that natural concretion processes could have produced spherical nodules within the soft pyrophyllite over immense spans of time. Yet none could adequately explain the grooved markings or their remarkable balance. Others suggested the spheres might have been forged artifacts that became encased in rock through unknown processes, an idea dismissed as implausible by orthodox geology, but eagerly embraced by those searching for evidence of lost civilizations. Over the years, the spheres became tokens of speculation, appearing in books, museums, and debates about forgotten ages of technology. One was displayed at the Klerksdorp Museum, where visitors noted its smoothness and the strange sense of design it carried, as though it were not born of pressure and heat, but of intention. Reports circulated that when placed on a level surface, the sphere would spin on its axis without vibration, though these claims remain unverified. To skeptics, such stories reflected exaggeration. To believers, they hinted at a deeper mystery, that intelligence may have preceded humanity in a form no longer recognizable. Another layer of intrigue developed from the sphere's context. The mines of Ottersdal have long yielded some of the oldest mineral formations on Earth, remnants of a time when the planet's crust was still settling. If the spheres are natural, their formation speaks to an astonishing precision within nature's design geometry arising from random compression. If they are not, then the implications reach into prehistory itself, challenging the idea that technological expression belongs solely to humankind. Archival studies have since revisited the original findings, tracing them through geological journals and local reports. Though modern research leans toward a natural origin, even those conclusions leave unanswered questions. The grooves, the polish, the consistent dimensions, each detail demands a level of uniformity that nature rarely achieves by accident. In that narrow space between coincidence and design lies the quiet power of the Klerksdorp spheres, objects that seem to bridge the mechanical and the mineral, the artificial and the ancient. If geometry can emerge unbidden from the heart of the Earth, perhaps intelligence has deeper roots than we dare imagine. The map of Piri Reis, spread across the table of a forgotten archive, the map appeared at first to be a curious relic, an aging scrap of parchment, marked by faint colours and delicate script, its edges worn by centuries of quiet neglect. Yet, as historians brushed away the dust in Istanbul's Topkapı Palace in 1929, they found themselves gazing upon something far stranger than an old navigational tool. Its creator, Piri Reis, served under the Ottoman banner during the height of its maritime power, both as a naval admiral and as a scholar of geography. His fascination with exploration led him to gather data from sailors, travellers, and earlier cartographers, creating a world map in 1513 that combined classical knowledge with first-hand seafaring accounts. Written in Ottoman Turkish and illustrated with astonishing care, it was said to be based on 20 different source maps. Among them are charts from Alexander the Great's era, medieval Arab geographers, and even the lost maps of Christopher Columbus himself. What set this fragment apart from all other maps of its age was the coastlines it dared to depict. Though only 1/3 of the original survives, the visible portion shows the western coast of Africa, the eastern edge of South America, and, most perplexingly, the northern shores of Antarctica, drawn with a clarity that would not be possible for another 3 centuries. In 1513, that landmass had not even been discovered, let alone charted, and it would remain concealed beneath miles of ice until modern expeditions revealed it in the 19th century. Drawn in vivid inks upon tanned gazelle skin, the map combines mathematical precision with a distinctly artistic eye. Even the decorative flourishes, sea monsters, ships, and compass roses seem less like ornament and more like subtle indicators of knowledge, encoded within imagery. For all its beauty, however, the document defies straightforward interpretation. Yet among the recognizable outlines of Africa and South America lies a coastline that mirrors Antarctica's subglacial contours as revealed by 20th century seismic surveys. The suggestion that an ancient civilization might once have known the true form of the southern continent has long fueled speculation, though no verifiable record supports such claims. Still, The precision with which the map follows the ice-free coast continues to trouble conventional history. Cartographers of the modern era have scrutinized the lines, measuring longitudes and latitudes that seem to align too closely with modern coordinates to be a coincidence. Some researchers proposed that the mapmaker might have used ancient Portolan charts, coastal outlines drawn from mariners' direct observation, but such charts were limited to the Mediterranean and North Atlantic. The southernmost features of the Piri Reis map fall well beyond the scope of any known maritime exploration of the early 16th century. Historical records suggest that Piri Reis compiled his work from a trove of older maps captured by the Ottomans during their naval campaigns. In his own notes inscribed on the map, Piri Reis claimed to have drawn from maps made in the time of Alexander the Great, implying that fragments of forgotten knowledge persisted through generations of copyists. Though the accuracy of this statement remains uncertain, it adds to the air of deep historical inheritance surrounding the map. Even so, portions of the coastline appear drawn with a precision that seems to transcend the tools of the Renaissance. Modern studies comparing it to satellite imagery suggest a startling correspondence between the drawn contours and the actual shape of land beneath Antarctic ice. If true, it would mean that whoever first charted the source material saw Antarctica in an ice-free state, which geological evidence places at least 6,000 years earlier. Such alignment invites questions that history cannot comfortably answer. How could information from an age before recorded civilization find its way into a 16th century map? The map's rediscovery in 1929 within the Topkapi Palace brought renewed fascination, sparking decades of debate among historians, archaeologists, and theorists alike. Today, it rests in Istanbul's archives, its surface protected from further decay, its colours fading, but its mystery undiminished. Every line, every inscription, every improbable curve still seems to whisper of an ancient knowledge that eludes comprehension. It remains unclear whether Piri Reis captured a forgotten memory of Earth's ancient face, or merely traced the edge of a mystery no one was meant to see. The Fuente Magna Bowl, before the bowl was known, its words had already been spoken. The faint, looping inscriptions carved into its surface seemed to murmur of civilizations separated by oceans and epochs. They ran along the inner walls like an echo of forgotten language signs that resembled cuneiform, yet appeared in a place where such writing should never have existed. The meaning of those symbols would become the heart of one of archaeology's strangest riddles, one that challenged how ancient contact across continents might have been possible at all. Unearthed near the Bolivian village of Chua, the bowl came to light not in an archaeological expedition, but by accident. A local farmer, digging by the shores of Lake Titicaca in the 1,950 seconds, uncovered a vessel half buried in mud. Its form was unmistakably Andean broad, earthen, made of dark stone, and decorated with local zoomorphic motif. Yet, upon cleaning the sediment from its inner surface, he found the incised patterns that would make it famous, lines and wedges arranged with deliberate precision, bearing no resemblance to the symbolic or pictorial traditions known from pre-Columbian South America. To those who first studied it, the carvings seemed impossibly familiar. The characters matched ancient Sumerian and Proto-Sumerian signs, the script used more than 5,000 years ago in Mesopotamia, on the far side of the world. When researchers compared photographs of the bowl to tablets preserved in Baghdad and Ur, they found uncanny parallels lines slanted at the same angles, repeated clusters forming patterns that appeared purposeful rather than decorative. The possibility that an Andean artifact carried writing from the cradle of civilization seemed absurd, yet the resemblance was undeniable. Comparisons emerged almost immediately, linking the symbols to Sumerian texts describing creation and divinity. Linguist Clyde Winters later proposed that the Fuente Magna's inscription resembled a form of proto-cuneiform used in early religious contexts, translating parts of the text as an invocation to the goddess Nia, a figure tied to fertility and water. If true, the bowl would represent not only the earliest form of writing in the Americas, but evidence of contact between Mesopotamia and the Andean world, a proposition that overturned the very boundaries of known human history. Skeptics countered that such precision could not predate known Andean scripts. No verified example of cuneiform had ever been found in the Western Hemisphere, and mainstream archaeologists dismissed the similarities as coincidental. They argued that human eyes are drawn to patterns and familiarity, and that resemblance does not prove connection. To them, The Fuente Magna's engravings might simply have been local symbols that happened, by chance, to echo another ancient design. Without context, without stratigraphic evidence, and without verifiable excavation records, the object's meaning remained unprovable. Chemical tests later traced the stone to local sources, confirming that the bowl was indeed made in Bolivia. The composition matched material found around Lake Titicaca, an area rich in archaeological remains dating to the Tiwanaku civilization. Yet this only deepened the paradox. If the bowl was indigenous, then why did it bear inscriptions foreign to the continent's history? The craftsmanship showed remarkable skill, precise, confident, and deliberate. Some researchers noted the polish of its interior, suggesting ceremonial use, while others speculated it could have been a libation vessel, perhaps meant for offerings to lake deities. The possibility that it had absorbed influences from an unknown or vanished cultural bridge could not be dismissed entirely. Still, the question of the bowl's authorship refused to fade. The museum in La Paz that once displayed it labelled it cautiously, describing the object as controversial and of uncertain origin. It has since become an emblem of alternative archaeology, a subject of heated debate among scholars and enthusiasts alike. To some, it represents an improbable but tantalizing link between the old world and the new, a relic of forgotten travelers or a civilization erased by time. To others, it is a cautionary tale about interpretation, the human tendency to read connection where none exists. Its surface, marked by hands unknown, now carries the weight of two civilizations. Whether those markings were etched by an ancient Andean artisan inspired by mythic visions, or by a modern hand seeking meaning in mimicry, remains unresolved. The Fuente Magna sits today in quiet preservation, guarded more for what it suggests than what it proves. Its carvings still gleam faintly under glass, as though the stone itself remembers a time when words were sacred, when meaning crossed oceans unseen. Across the silence of millennia, the bowl waits not to be read, but to be understood. The Voynich manuscript. It begins not with a story, but with silence pages filled with words that no one has ever understood. Bound in calfskin vellum, its script flows in graceful loops that imitate the rhythm of language, yet belong to none. Hundreds of pages carry strange illustrations, constellations that do not exist, plants that no botanist has ever classified, and diagrams whose logic feels almost human before slipping into a dream. For centuries, it has invited the gaze of scholars, mystics, and cryptographers alike, each certain that understanding lies only one symbol away, yet none have breached its calm, deliberate secrecy. When the Polish bookseller Wilfrid Voynich discovered the manuscript in an Italian villa in 1912, he believed he had uncovered a forgotten treasure. The villa once belonged to the Jesuits, and among the papers kept there were letters linking the book to the Holy Roman Emperor Rudolph II, a ruler known for his fascination with alchemy and the occult. Voynich was convinced it was the lost work of Roger Bacon, the 13th century scholar who combined mysticism with early scientific reasoning. But as the book passed from one analyst to another, every confident claim dissolved into uncertainty, as though the manuscript deliberately erased the trail of its own past. Each page revealed something stranger than the last: looping letters that followed no known alphabet, plants that grew in no earthly soil, women floating in pools beneath impossible stars. There are fold-out diagrams depicting star wheels and bath-like chambers connected by thin streams of ink, resembling both anatomical organs and cosmic maps. Some pages shimmer faintly under ultraviolet light, revealing pigment traces derived from azurite, malachite, and verdigris materials common in medieval Europe, but arranged with a precision suggesting more than ornamentation. Even the margins, where notes might appear, remain untouched, as if the scribe feared interruption from any lesser hand. To decipher it became a calling for those drawn to the impossible. Linguists, code breakers, and even military intelligence officers devoted years to its riddles. During the Second World War, members of Britain's Bletchley Park, experts who cracked the Enigma code, turned their attention to the Voynich and found themselves defeated by patterns that behaved like meaning, yet concealed none they could recognize. Later, computer algorithms sought repetition and syntax, discovering that the script follows statistical laws identical to human language, proof that it was not random, yet still unreadable. Every layer of analysis deepened the sense that the manuscript's purpose was not communication, but endurance. Theories multiplied as fast as they were disproven, Some claimed it to be an herbal compendium written in a cipher meant to protect medical secrets. Others argued it was an elaborate alchemical notebook, or even a mystical guide for spiritual ascent. A few dismissed it as a 16th century hoax crafted for profit, though the radiocarbon evidence contradicts that. Each theory, no matter how carefully built, collapses beneath the same weight of unknowability, leaving only the question of why anyone would devote such skill and patience to creating a text that no one could ever read. Carbon dating placed the vellum in the early 1400s, its ink of consistent age and composition authentic, yet inexplicable. The script matches no known cipher system of its era, and the linguistic structure defies the mechanics of both European and Asian languages. Some modern researchers suspect it encodes multiple substitution layers, perhaps phonetic transcriptions of an extinct tongue. Others think it may not encode language at all, but ideas, visual grammar, rather than verbal text. Even so, the manuscript feels too purposeful, too precise, to be meaningless. Every page carries the restraint of intent, as though the author wrote with the absolute conviction that understanding would one day be possible. At present, the Voynich manuscript resists the very idea of comprehension, as though written for a world that never came to be. It rests in Yale University's Beinecke Rare Book and Manuscript Library, its parchment sealed in protective glass, its digital facsimile studied by thousands who come away no closer than Voynich himself. 5 centuries after its creation, the text remains intact, letters neither faded nor smudged, drawings still luminous, as if time itself refuses to corrode what the human mind cannot claim. It waits, perfectly preserved, in that strange silence between language and mystery. Perhaps it was never meant to be read, only to remind us how fragile our understanding of language truly is. The Nampa figurine. The drill bit struck something solid deep in the damp Idaho soil, producing a sharp metallic clink that echoed across the excavation site and immediately drew the workers' attention. Steam shovels paused, and hands reached into the churned mud, brushing away layers of clay to reveal a tiny, humanoid shape. No larger than an inch, it had been encased in sediment so compact that the earliest observers could hardly believe it had survived the centuries, or possibly millennia, without damage. The moment was electric, a jolt of curiosity mixed with disbelief. An ordinary excavation in Nampa had unexpectedly produced an artifact whose presence challenged everything known about the continent's human history. A fragment of artistry, hidden in layers, thought to belong to an age long before humans were believed to exist in the region. From the wet clay emerged a figure crafted with an artistry that seemed impossibly sophisticated for its size. Its torso was slender and elegantly proportioned, with arms folded across the chest, legs slightly bent as if poised mid-step. The head bore the faintest suggestion of facial features, and the back displayed delicate, incised markings that might have been decorative or symbolic. Even the tiny fingers and toes were individually formed. Despite measuring only about 1 inch tall, the figurine conveyed a sense of deliberate intention, a miniature statue created with precision rather than chance. It suggested a culture capable of fine workmanship, one that should not have existed in the time and place suggested by the surrounding sediment. Geologists soon realized that the layer in which it was found was no ordinary deposit. Buried 12 to 15 feet below the surface in a dense, compacted stratum of sand, silt, and clay, the sediment had been assigned to the Pliocene epoch, roughly 2 million years ago. If the figurine was indeed embedded in this layer, it predated any known human activity in North America by an almost unimaginable span of time. Laboratory analysis of microfossils in the surrounding sediment confirmed their Pliocene age, providing an independent line of evidence that the layer had not been disturbed by later geological events. Some proposed that the artifact could have been displaced downward by natural forces such as flooding or glacial movement, yet the surrounding sediment showed no signs of upheaval or intrusion. The soil had hardened around the figurine, seemingly preserving it in a state of suspended mystery, defying the expectations of stratigraphy and common sense alike. Experts descended upon Nampa, armed with microscopes, measuring instruments, and cautious skepticism. Initial X-ray fluorescence tests suggested elemental traces consistent with natural clays and iron compounds, hinting that the figurine may have undergone primitive firing or mineralization processes not previously associated with artifacts of such antiquity. Archaeologists debated whether the figurine could be genuine, while geologists analyzed the surrounding deposits for signs of disturbance. Several tests suggested that the clay composing the figure was consistent with the local Pliocene sediment, and that traces of iron oxide might indicate primitive firing techniques. Others dismissed the find as a hoax, a small trinket accidentally embedded or deliberately planted during earlier excavations. Yet early photographs of the artifact, taken before any handling, show it partially encased in undisturbed clay layers, lending credibility to the claim that it was genuinely ancient. Every investigation seemed only to deepen the mystery. If authentic, the figurine demanded a radical re-evaluation of human or proto-human presence on the continent. Its existence implied that some form of intelligent life capable of artistic expression could have existed millions of years ago, long before Homo sapiens appeared. Anthropologists and paleontologists speculated, could an unknown species have developed fine craftsmanship, or might there have been migratory populations now erased from the archaeological record? The Nampa figurine became not just an object of study, but a challenge to long-held assumptions about the timeline of human evolution and artistic development. Today, the Nampa figurine rests behind glass, neither fully authenticated nor entirely dismissed, preserved as a symbol of enduring mystery. Its red clay surface gleams faintly under display lights, the incised details and miniature proportions still intact. Scholars continue to debate its origins, photographs circulate among enthusiasts, and advanced analytical techniques promise insight, yet the figurine maintains its silence. It serves as a meditation on possibility, a tiny figure whose significance is measured not in inches, but in the vast stretches of time it seems to traverse, questioning what we think we know about humanity's past. Maybe its disappearance was never temporal at all, but a failure of understanding itself.